Electricity prices are increasing around the globe, which is leading many people to consider solar. And for many, it makes a lot of sense. The growth of solar power over the last 20 years has been phenomenal, and there seems to be no end in sight. Coal power will be supplanted by solar as the largest source of electricity within 10 years, leading to the death of U.S. Secretary of Energy.
I'm pretty confident coal will lead the world in global electricity production when I die.
If you're considering getting solar, you first need to understand the three types of systems that you might install at your home. I'm not talking about the solar panels. Any panel can be used in all three types of systems. And I'm not talking about brands. Again, you might find the same brand in all three categories. But the price differences of these three types of systems is enormous, from several hundreds of dollars to tens of thousands. What you get out of it also varies enormously. And for some people, the most expensive system is a sound investment. And for others, the cheapest is the only one that makes sense. Even if you're a renter, stick around to the end because these are the systems that might make sense for you. Again, this has nothing to do with the panels themselves. The first photovoltaic panel, one that converted light into electricity, was built in 1883. The modern PV panel was invented at Bell Labs in 1954. Since then, the costs have plummeted and the efficiency improved, but the basic science of the panels has remained unchanged. What is different for these systems are the electronics that take the energy from the panel and prepare it for use. Here I'm going to focus on residential solar, but the first two types of systems are also common in large systems. Let's start with the most common system. If you see a house with solar panels on the roof, this is what they probably have. The panels output direct current or DC power. Since household appliances are typically designed for alternating current or AC, you need an inverter to turn the DC power to AC before it's fed into your home's wires. In these systems, your solar panels work with the grid. When the sun is shining, your solar panels may take care of all of your needs, and the excess is fed into the grid. When your demand is high, the solar power is augmented by the grid, and at night, all of your power comes from the grid. This only works if your electricity is perfectly synchronized with the grid. You must have a grid-following inverter, which takes the DC power from the panels and turns it into AC power that perfectly matches the grid. I talked more about inverters in this video. One of the downsides is if the grid goes down, so does your solar system. That's because if you feed current into the grid during a power outage, it could injure a utility worker who's trying to fix the problem. If your inverter doesn't see power coming from the grid, it turns everything off. If you own your own home and you don't have a lot of power outages, then this is probably the system for you. This is especially true if your home has a south-facing roof and your electricity rates are high. And if you see solar panels on a school or office or over a parking lot, they probably are this type of system. The second type of system looks identical from the street, but hidden away are two major differences. The first is the inverter. In normal operations, it will be identical to the first type of system, but if the power from the utility goes out, it responds very differently. First, it will sever the connection with the grid. That prevents current going out to the grid and injuring a utility worker. The inverter will then transform from a grid-following inverter to a grid-forming one, allowing your system to form a microgrid. The second difference is a system like this really doesn't make sense without batteries, which can double the cost of your system. If you live in an isolated place, you might forego the utility connection entirely, in which case you'll probably need more solar panels and batteries. We are seeing systems like this across the Caribbean islands, since the grids there often fail during hurricane season. Hurricane Maria in 2017 knocked out service to 80% of Puerto Rico's residents. Now approximately 83% of residential and commercial rooftop solar systems there can continue operation during blackouts. In the description, I have a link to a video about a factory in Zimbabwe that has a very large system like this to keep a factory running during the common power outages. Systems like this are also popular in war zones like Ukraine, as it's harder for the Russians to target 1,000 solar panels than one fossil fuel gas power plant and the pipeline that keeps it going. Grid forming inverters are currently rare on the grid, but I do believe that in the near future, most large solar and wind facilities will have batteries and grid forming inverters and be able to feed power onto the grid whenever it's needed, not just when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing. They will also be able to provide grid services like frequency stabilization and black starts that they are currently unable to provide. But unless you suffer from power outages, I wouldn't recommend going this route. There are better things to do with your money. If you're a rich prepper or just into technology, then you might consider it. The third type of system is currently the least common, especially in the US, but I suspect that won't be true for long. These systems are often called balcony solar, but are better described as plug-in solar. That's because all you do is put the solar panels somewhere where they can see the sun, possibly on a balcony, but also just in your backyard or on your roof, and then you plug them into a standard outlet. No electricians, no permits. The systems include a grid-following microinverter, and the power just flows from the solar panel to the inverter to a standard plug and through your home's wiring to power your refrigerator, TV, computer, or whatever else is using power. These systems are limited to a lower power than a large roof-mounted system for safety reasons, between 200 watts and 1.6 kilowatts, while a standard rooftop solar installation can be up to 5 kilowatts. But the cost per watt of the power is significantly lower for the plug-in systems since the labor costs are zero. In Belgium, you can even order a system from IKEA starting at €350 or $411 for an 800-watt systems. They even come with an Allen wrench for assembly. For context, if you position an 800-watt panel reasonably well, they'll generate about 10% of the electricity typically consumed by a U.S. household. Depending on the cost of your electricity, these panels will pay for themselves in about 3 years. In Germany, plug-in solar is common with over 400,000 systems registered at the end of 2024, adding up to over 400 megawatts of capacity. No safety issues have arisen for these systems. But while they're common in Germany, the US, Ireland, and most other countries have yet to see adoption because the regulations haven't caught up with the technology. For instance, in Ireland, all solar systems currently require a professional electrician for installation, so they just aren't here. In the US, only one state, Utah, has passed the legislation necessary for plug-in solars, and even there, only systems with Underwriters Laboratory or UL approved are allowed. And UL didn't have a standard to test against until early 2026. But now UL is beginning to qualify systems, and 28 states are considering legislation for plug-in solar. So it's likely that these systems will become common quickly. If you're a renter, a plug-in system makes a lot of sense since you can take it with you when you move. But even if you're a homeowner, if you can't afford the thousands for a full system, spending hundreds for a plug-in system might be a good option. Which system should you get will depend on your situation and what incentives are available. But here are questions that you should ask. Do I own my own home? Is my electricity rate high? Do I have a south-facing roof with clear view of the sky? Are there attractive incentives available? If so, you should definitely consider a roof-mounted system. Next question is, are outages common enough that I'm buying candles in bulk and I've installed a wood-burning stove? If yes, then you should consider a system that can work when the grid is down, especially if the answer to most of the first questions were yes. But if you're answering no a lot, plug-in solar might be a good option if they're legal where you live. They work in Germany, a highly regulated country with a northern climate, so they probably make sense everywhere. So the question to ask is, do I have a place where I can put a couple of solar panels near a plug that has a reasonable view of the sky? The cost for these systems is so low that if you have a place for them, it almost certainly makes sense to install a panel or two. The only other good reason to not install them is they're not legal. And if that's the case, then you have a question for the powers that be. Why aren't these legal? Let me know in the comments which kind of system makes sense for you and if you have installed solar. If you haven't, let me know if you'd consider a plug-in system if you could pick it up at IKEA or Home Depot. It's time for just about everyone to go solar, at least a little bit. Plug-in solar is an exciting new option for millions of households that currently can't take advantage of the solar revolution. It isn't a panacea, but it could quickly reduce residential energy consumption by 10 to 20% at a low cost. You can support this channel by buying me a pint or a YouTube thanks, or watch more of my videos on the electrical grid. If you've learned something, please like and subscribe, and please share this video with everyone you know who is considering getting solar panels.